Through the frosted glass windows of Savory and Soul, Marcus Johnson watches the last dinner guests gathering their coats. The crisp autumn air nips at his neck as he pulls open the heavy wooden door, his designer duffel bag slung over his shoulder. The warm scents of garlic and herbs remind him of childhood dinners with his brother David, now the owner of this acclaimed restaurant. He settles at the polished bar, already imagining the look of surprise on David's face. The restaurant's interior wraps around him like a warm embrace. Crystal chandeliers cast a gentle glow over the burgundy walls, while soft jazz floats through hidden speakers. Marcus takes in the carefully curated artwork, pieces from local black artists that David has collected over the years. He recognizes their mother's favorite painting, a vibrant street scene from their childhood neighborhood in Atlanta, hanging prominently near the entrance. Running his fingers along the smooth mahogany bar, Marcus recalls the countless late-night conversations he'd had with David about this dream. Back then, it had seemed impossible. Two kids from a modest background planning to open an upscale restaurant in the city's most exclusive district. Yet here it stands, 5 years later, with reservations booked months in advance and critics singing its praises. A young bartender, busy wiping glasses, offers Marcus a gentle smile. He orders a glass of water, not wanting to disturb the closing routine. From his vantage point, he observes the well-orchestrated dance of the restaurant staff. Servers gracefully clearing final plates, busboys carefully arranging chairs, and the occasional burst of steam escaping from the kitchen doors, where he knows his brother is probably still perfecting tomorrow's special. The last time Marcus had visited was 2 years ago, just before taking the consulting position in Chicago. The promotion had been too good to pass up, but distance had made their bond stronger. Weekly video calls filled with kitchen disasters, business advice, and shared laughs kept them connected. Still, nothing beats surprising his little brother in person. His phone buzzes, a text from their mother. "Did you make it? Don't let him work all night again." Marcus smiles, remembering how she'd always find David experimenting in their kitchen at midnight, creating new recipes while everyone else slept. Some things never change. The light from the kitchen suggests David's still at it. A couple lingering over their dessert catches Marcus's attention. The woman closes her eyes as she tastes the restaurant's famous sweet potato pie, a recipe passed down from their grandmother. David had insisted on keeping it exactly as she made it, down to the precise amount of nutmeg. The woman's expression of pure joy would have made their grandmother proud. The maitre d' begins dimming the main dining room lights, signaling the approaching closing time. Marcus checks his watch, 10:45 p.m. He knows David's routine. Final kitchen inspection at 11, then paperwork in the office until midnight. The surprise should be perfectly timed. He adjusts his position on the bar stool, taking in the subtle details of the space. The custom wine racks David designed himself, the hand-blown glass light fixtures they discovered at a local artisan studio, and the small framed photo behind the bar of their family, standing in front of the building on opening day. The restaurant has evolved since then, but its soul remains unchanged, a testament to perseverance, family legacy, and the power of unwavering brotherhood. As Marcus sits there, soaking in the atmosphere of his brother's dream turned reality, he's unaware that the next few minutes will test those very bonds in ways he never expected. Sarah Weber strides across the restaurant floor, her heels clicking against the hardwood. 6 weeks as manager, and she's determined to prove herself. She eyes the man at the bar, leather jacket, jeans, alone. Her mind races through recent reports of theft in nearby establishments. Without a second thought, she adjusts her blazer and approaches, her voice sharp enough to turn heads. The weight of her new position sits heavily on her shoulders. Just yesterday, the owner of the Italian restaurant 2 blocks down had called about a series of dine-and-dash incidents. Sarah had promised to stay vigilant, eager to show the restaurant community that Savory and Soul would not be an easy target under her watch. She takes mental inventory of the closing procedures still ahead, counting the day's receipts, preparing the staff schedule for next week, and ensuring the kitchen meets their exacting standards. The stranger at the bar represents an unwelcome complication. In her mind, the restaurant's reputation hangs on every decision she makes. As she approaches, Sarah catalogs the details that triggered her suspicion. The man's casual attire seems out of place among the restaurant's usual clientele. His quiet observation of the space reads to her as casing the establishment. The designer duffel bag at his feet could easily conceal tools or stolen goods. Each assumption builds upon the last, constructing a narrative that exists solely in her mind. "Excuse me, sir," she begins, her tone carrying the artificial politeness she reserves for difficult situations. "We're closing for the evening. I'll have to ask you to leave." Her hand rests on the bar, a subtle assertion of authority over the space. Marcus turns to face her, his expression calm and measured. "I understand you're closing. I'm actually waiting for someone." His voice carries a warmth that should give her pause, but Sarah's momentum has already taken over. "I'm the manager here, and we don't allow loitering after hours," she continues, her voice rising slightly. "If you're not actively finishing a meal, you'll need to wait outside." The few remaining staff members within earshot freeze, recognizing the man but trapped in a hierarchy that keeps them silent. Sarah feels a flush of irritation as Marcus remains seated, his composure unwavering. In her 6 weeks as manager, she's dealt with difficult customers, late deliveries, and staffing emergencies. Each challenge has reinforced her belief that authority must be absolute. The restaurant's premium reputation demands nothing less. "Sir, if you don't leave immediately, I'll be forced to call security," she declares, pulling out her phone for emphasis. The threat hangs in the air, heavy and unnecessary. A nearby table of diners sets down their forks, the quiet clink of silverware punctuating the tension. The situation has drawn an audience now. Sarah sees this as vindication, witnesses to her dedication to maintaining order. She doesn't notice the discomfort on their faces, the way some cast their eyes down to their plates, or how others exchange worried glances. What Sarah also fails to notice is the kitchen door swinging open, the tall figure emerging in a chef's coat, and the sudden shift in energy throughout the restaurant. Her focus remains locked on Marcus, her professional mask firmly in place, even as her next words are about to shatter the carefully constructed image she's built for herself over these 6 weeks. She's so caught up in her role as protector of the establishment that she doesn't see she's become exactly what she's tried to guard against, a source of discord in an otherwise harmonious space. The evening air grows thick with tension as Marcus maintains his composed demeanor, even as Sarah's voice rises. Longtime server Maria Rodriguez grips her serving tray tightly, recognizing the owner's brother, but paralyzed by workplace hierarchy. Nearby diners set down their forks, the final bites of their meals forgotten as the scene unfolds. A young couple whispers in disapproval, not at Sarah, but at Marcus, while an elderly man half rises from his seat, clearly troubled by the manager's behavior. Maria has worked at Savory and Soul since opening day. She remembers Marcus helping to paint these very walls, sharing jokes and dreams with David as they transformed the space from an abandoned storefront into this elegant establishment. Now she watches helplessly as Sarah continues her misguided crusade, each word digging a deeper hole. The bartender, James, polishes the same glass for the 5th time, his knuckles white against the cloth. He's seen Marcus and David video chatting during slow afternoons, heard the brothers laugh about childhood memories and share business advice. The weight of knowledge sits heavy on his shoulders, but challenging Sarah could mean risking his position. At a corner table, an older black couple exchanges knowing glances. The woman reaches across to squeeze her husband's hand, a gesture born from decades of similar experiences. They've been regular customers since the restaurant opened, drawn not just by the exceptional food, but by what David's success represents for the community. Sarah's voice cuts through the murmurs. "Sir, I've asked you politely. This is your final warning before I call security." Her phone remains raised like a shield, though her hand trembles slightly. Something in Marcus's calm demeanor has begun to shake her certainty, but pride prevents her retreat. Marcus straightens in his seat, his expression a careful mask of dignity. "I understand you're doing your job," he begins, his voice steady and clear. "But I think there might be some assumptions being made here that we should discuss." A young server drops a stack of menus, the clatter making everyone jump. The sound seems to crack the restaurant in half. Those who understand what's really happening, and those still viewing the scene through Sarah's distorted lens. The elderly man who had half risen finally stands completely. "Young lady," he calls out, his voice carrying the weight of years, "I suggest you reconsider your approach." But Sarah doesn't hear him, too focused on what she perceives as a threat to her authority. Through the kitchen window, the line cooks have stopped their closing duties, watching the scene unfold. They know Marcus from his previous visits, remember how he always makes a point to thank the kitchen staff, asking about their families and sharing stories about David's early cooking disasters. The tension reaches its peak as Sarah's finger hovers over her phone's keypad. The remaining diners have become unwitting participants in this theater of assumptions, some recording discreetly on their phones, others averting their eyes in discomfort, a few gathering courage to speak up. Maria finally steps forward, her voice barely a whisper. "Sarah, I think you should." But her words are cut short by a sudden crash from the kitchen. All heads turn toward the sound, and in that moment, the restaurant's atmosphere shifts dramatically. The kitchen doors burst open, and with them comes the revelation that will transform an ordinary evening into a moment of reckoning, one that will force everyone present to confront their own biases and assumptions. A bottle crashes in the kitchen, shattering the tense standoff. David bursts through the swinging doors, his chef's coat still dusted with flour. His booming laugh at seeing his brother dies in his throat as he processes the scene before him. Sarah's face drains of color as David rushes past her to embrace Marcus, their matching smiles confirming what she has failed to see. The dining room collectively inhales, waiting for the aftermath. David's eyes dart between his brother and his manager, piecing together the scene before him. The flour on his hands leaves white prints on Marcus's leather jacket as they embrace, but neither brother seems to notice. The restaurant falls into a silence so complete that the soft jazz playing overhead sounds suddenly intrusive. "Marcus, why didn't you tell me you were coming?" David's voice carries the warmth of family, but his eyes never leave Sarah's face. He watches as realization crashes over her in waves, first confusion, then horror, and finally understanding. Her phone slips from her grip, clattering onto the bar top. Marcus's response carries no hint of the confrontation that preceded this moment. "Thought I'd surprise you, little brother. Been too long since I've had your sweet potato pie." His words are light, but they land heavy in the space between them. The mention of their family recipe serves as a subtle reminder of his belonging in this space. Sarah takes a stumbling step backward, her heels catching on the hardwood floor. The authority she wielded moments ago evaporates as David turns to face her fully. His expression isn't angry, it's something far more devastating. Disappointment mixed with a deep, tired understanding. "I see you've met my brother," David says, his voice carefully neutral. Marcus is not just family. He's also an investor in Savory and Soul. He helped build this place. Each word lands like a gentle hammer, dismantling the assumptions that led to this moment. The remaining diners witnessed the scene with varying reactions. The elderly man who had stood up earlier nods in grim satisfaction. The young couple who had whispered their disapproval now stare at their plates, their own prejudices laid bare before them. Maria, the longtime server, finally allows herself to breathe. Sarah opens her mouth to speak, but no words come. Her mind races through every interaction she's had in her 6 weeks as manager, wondering how many other assumptions she's made, how many other mistakes are waiting to be uncovered. The brothers stand side by side now, their resemblance suddenly obvious. The same subtle arch of their eyebrows, the identical way they hold their shoulders. David's flour-dusted chef's coat and Marcus's designer leather jacket tell different stories of success, but their shared DNA is unmistakable. Perhaps, David suggests, his tone professional but firm, we should continue this conversation in my office. He gestures toward the back of the restaurant, where a door marked private stands slightly ajar. The invitation is clearly meant for Sarah as well, whose complexion has shifted from pale to flushed. As the three move toward the office, the restaurant slowly returns to life. Servers resume their closing duties. Though their movements are mechanical, their minds still processing what they've witnessed. The remaining diners signal for their checks, eager to leave, but knowing they've been part of something significant. The gentle click of the office door closing echoes through the dining room, marking the end of one chapter and the beginning of another, one that will reshape not just this evening, but the entire culture of savory and soul. In the dim light of the now empty restaurant, Marcus perches on a bar stool, swirling aged whiskey while David paces. Sarah sits at a corner table, her resignation letter half written on a piece of letterhead. The brothers share a look that speaks of decades of similar experiences, of countless times they've had to decide between anger and education. David pulls up a chair at Sarah's table, and Marcus joins them, ready to turn this moment into something meaningful. The ice in Marcus's glass clinks softly as he sets it down. The sound echoes through the empty dining room, now cleared of witnesses, but still heavy with the residue of confrontation. The cleaning staff has gone home, leaving behind the faint scent of lemon polish and the day's final pot of coffee brewing. A tradition David maintains for these late-night conversations. I should leave, Sarah says, her voice barely above a whisper. Her fingers trace the edges of her half-written resignation. I've embarrassed the restaurant, betrayed your trust, and demonstrated exactly the kind of behavior that has no place in any establishment. Her professional facade has crumbled, revealing the raw vulnerability beneath. David leans back in his chair, studying the ceiling for a moment. You know, when I first opened this place, a supplier refused to believe I was the owner, kept asking to speak to my boss, even after I showed him my business cards and licenses. He pauses, pouring himself a cup of the fresh coffee. Marcus had to come down and handle it. Isn't that right, brother? Marcus nods, his expression thoughtful. The supplier apologized profusely once he realized his mistake. But here's what matters. He became one of our strongest business relationships because he was willing to learn from that moment. His eyes meet Sarah's across the table. The question is, what are you willing to learn? Sarah's hand stills over her resignation letter. The tears she's been holding back finally spill onto her cheeks. I was so focused on proving myself, on protecting this place, that I became the very threat I was guarding against. I disrupted the peace, made assumptions based on. She trails off, unable to finish the thought. Based on what you saw, not who you saw. David completes her sentence gently. He pulls the resignation letter away from her, folding it deliberately before tucking it into his pocket. This isn't about punishment, Sarah. It's about growth. The kitchen's motion sensors catch movement through the window, casting brief shadows across their faces. Marcus leans forward, his voice carrying the weight of experience. You know what I see? I see someone who cares deeply about doing their job well. That passion just needs to be redirected, informed by understanding rather than assumptions. I don't deserve a second chance, Sarah whispers, but David holds up his hand. Second chances aren't about deserving. They're about what we do with them, he says, standing to retrieve a familiar leather-bound notebook from behind the bar. It's the restaurant's original business plan, its pages now dog-eared and coffee-stained. When we opened, this place was meant to be more than just a restaurant. It was meant to be a space where barriers break down over good food and honest conversation. As he speaks, Marcus pulls out his phone, bringing up photos of the restaurant's early days. David and him painting walls, installing fixtures, planning menus. Each image tells a story of dreams built on understanding and unity rather than division and assumptions. The night deepens around them, but in that corner of savory and soul, something new begins to take root. a chance for genuine change, sprouting from the soil of difficult truths and watered by the willingness to learn. Over the next few hours, their conversation weaves through personal stories, unconscious biases, and hard truths. Marcus shares stories from his consulting work, where he's often mistaken for junior staff despite being the firm's partner. Sarah listens, truly listens, her earlier defensiveness melting into understanding. David sketches out plans for change on the back of a menu, his chef's precision now focused on rebuilding his restaurant's culture. The coffee grows cold in their cups as Marcus recounts a recent client meeting. I walked into the boardroom first, followed by my junior associate, Tom. Everyone automatically started addressing him as Mr. Johnson. He pauses, letting the weight of the moment settle. Tom, to his credit, immediately corrected them. But it's exhausting, constantly having to prove you belong in spaces you've earned the right to occupy. Sarah wrings her hands beneath the table, her voice shaky but determined. I never thought of myself as someone who would do this. I pride myself on being fair, progressive even. She looks up, meeting Marcus's eyes directly for the first time since the confrontation. But tonight showed me that intentions aren't enough, do they? David, who has been quietly sketching on the menu, spreads it out on the table. His neat handwriting outlines a new training program, but more than that, a cultural shift. See, Sarah, what happened tonight. It's not just about you, or Marcus, or even this restaurant. It's about patterns so deeply ingrained that we often don't recognize them until they're staring us in the face. The light from the kitchen catches the tears tracking down Sarah's cheeks, but her voice grows stronger. I keep thinking about Maria trying to warn me, about James at the bar, about all the signals I missed because I was so certain I was right. She takes a deep breath. How do I start to unlearn these patterns? Marcus leans forward, his expression earnest. By acknowledging them first, by understanding that these biases don't make you a bad person, but refusing to address them does. He gestures to David's notes. And by being willing to do the hard work of change. David begins outlining his vision, his chef's precision evident in every detail. We start with our staff. Open discussions, regular training, creating spaces where everyone feels comfortable speaking up. But most importantly, we examine our own reactions, our instant judgments, our unconscious assumptions. The hardest part, Marcus adds, is accepting that this work never really ends. It's not about reaching some perfect state of enlightenment. It's about staying aware, staying open, staying willing to learn and grow. Sarah reaches for David's menu-turned-action plan, her managerial instincts kicking in despite her emotional turmoil. We could implement this immediately. Start with staff meetings, create anonymous feedback channels, establish clear protocols that eliminate snap judgments. She pauses, looking between the brothers. That is, if you still want me to be part of this. David and Marcus exchange a look, years of unspoken understanding passing between them. David speaks first. Sarah, sometimes our biggest mistakes become our most powerful teachers. The question is, are you ready to not just learn, but to help others learn too? The night has grown old around them, the restaurant's usual bustling energy replaced by a different kind of vibrance, the electricity of transformation. Through the windows, the first hints of dawn begin to paint the sky, promising a new day, and with it, the chance to begin again, differently. Sarah straightens in her chair, squaring her shoulders as if physically accepting the weight of this responsibility. Yes, she says simply, but with conviction. Yes, I am. Summer turns to fall, and savory and soul transforms. Sarah channels her perfectionism into creating new welcome protocols, working closely with David to change not just rules but mindsets. The staff begins each shift with open discussions, sharing experiences and perspectives that were once kept silent. Regular customers notice the shift, not just in policy, but in the very atmosphere of the place. 3 months after the incident, Sarah stands before the assembled staff during their morning meeting, her confidence now tempered with humility. The morning sun streams through the windows, catching the subtle changes in the restaurant's decor, new artwork representing diverse perspectives, a community board showcasing local events, and a framed mission statement that speaks of inclusion and understanding. Remember, she addresses the group. Our first interaction with a guest sets the tone for their entire experience. Her eyes meet those of each staff member, lingering on the newer hires. We don't make assumptions. We lead with warmth. We create space for everyone to feel welcomed. The words aren't just protocol now. They're a mantra born from hard-earned wisdom. Maria, now promoted to head server, shares her own story with the team. Last week, a customer questioned whether I could really recommend a wine pairing, suggesting they should speak to someone more qualified. She pauses, a small smile playing at her lips. Instead of feeling diminished, I remembered our training. I shared my certification credentials and turned that moment into an opportunity to educate. The kitchen staff, once separate from these conversations, now participates fully. James, the bartender who witnessed the original incident, has developed a series of signature cocktails named after diverse cultural celebrations, each drink coming with a story that sparks meaningful conversations among guests. David moves through the restaurant during prep time, noting how the energy has shifted. The nervous tension that once preceded service has been replaced by confident preparation. Staff members chat across departments, sharing insights and experiences that make them better at their jobs and more understanding as people. Sarah's office door, once firmly closed, now stays open. The wall behind her desk displays certificates from diversity training programs, but more importantly, thank you notes from staff members who found their voices under her revised leadership. Her phone, once wielded as a weapon of authority, now holds a gallery of staff celebration photos and archived conversations about growth. The changes ripple outward. Regular customers bring new friends, specifically mentioning the welcoming atmosphere. Reviews praise not just the food but the inclusive environment. Other restaurants in the area begin reaching out, asking about their training programs and protocols. One Tuesday afternoon, during a staff education session, Sarah shares the story of that fateful night with new employees. Her voice no longer carries shame but purpose. I could have let that mistake define me, define this place, she tells them. Instead, we let it refine us. The training materials she's developed have become a model for other establishments. Her original half-written resignation letter, now framed in her office, serves as a daily reminder of how close she came to walking away instead of walking forward. As the evening service approaches, the staff moves with practiced grace through their preparation routines. The host stand, where Sarah once stood in judgment, now displays a small sign reading "Welcome Home" in multiple languages. The message is subtle but clear. This space belongs to everyone. David, watching from the kitchen pass, catches Sarah's eye and nods. They both know that change isn't a destination but a journey. Yet with each passing day, Savory and Soul proves that a restaurant can be more than a place to eat. It can be a catalyst for transformation, one interaction at a time. On a busy Friday evening, Marcus walks into Savory and Soul again. This time, Sarah greets him with a warm smile and their signature cocktail. David emerges from the kitchen to find his brother engaged in animated conversation with his staff, sharing stories like old friends. The restaurant hums with energy, each table a snapshot of diversity, each interaction marked by genuine respect. Marcus settles at his familiar spot at the bar, but everything else feels different. The staff moves with a new kind of confidence, and the dining room buzzes with diverse languages and laughter. He watches as Sarah gracefully handles the evening rush, her interactions with guests and staff alike, marked by authentic warmth and attention. "Your usual, Mr. Johnson?" James asks, already reaching for the top-shelf whiskey. "We've been using your story in our training sessions, you know. It's become quite the cornerstone of our culture talks." He slides over a perfectly crafted old-fashioned, garnished with her grandmother's special brandied cherries, a touch David added to honor their family traditions. Sarah approaches, carrying a leather-bound portfolio. "I've been wanting to show you this," she says, opening it to reveal dozens of letters from other restaurant managers and owners. They're all asking about our inclusion training program. Apparently, word's gotten around about how we've changed things here. David joins them, wiping his hands on his apron. The three of them flip through the portfolio together, pausing at photos of staff meetings, training sessions, and community events. One image catches Marcus's eye. It's a group shot from their first staff diversity celebration, where everyone brought dishes representing their heritage. Sarah stands in the center, her face alight with genuine joy. "Remember that night?" David asks, his voice soft with reflection. "Who would have thought that one of our hardest moments would lead to all of this?" He gestures around the dining room, where servers of various backgrounds attend to an equally diverse clientele. At one table, a young black executive hosts a business dinner. At another, an elderly couple celebrates their anniversary. Near the window, a group of college students from different countries share plates and stories. Sarah shares a recent story. "Last week, a new manager from across town came in. She was dealing with similar issues we faced. Instead of just giving advice, I shared our journey, mistakes and all. She left with hope, knowing change is possible if you're willing to do the work." The kitchen doors swing open, releasing the aroma of David's latest special, a fusion dish inspired by their grandmother's recipes and his classical training. The smell draws appreciative murmurs from nearby diners, a reminder that good food, like good change, brings people together. Marcus raises his glass in a subtle toast. "To growth," he says simply, but his eyes convey much more. Sarah and David join him, their glasses catching the warm light of the dining room. A new family enters the restaurant. They seem uncertain, perhaps their first time in an upscale establishment. Sarah notices immediately, moving to welcome them with the same grace she now shows everyone. From his vantage point, Marcus watches as she makes them feel at home, their initial tension melting into comfortable smiles. As the evening progresses, the brothers catch each other's eye across the room, sharing a quiet nod. The restaurant has become more than they dreamed, not just a successful business, but a model for change. In the gentle buzz of conversation, the clink of glasses, and the warm exchanges between staff and guests, there's something profound. The sound of barriers breaking down, of understanding growing, of community building. Savory and Soul lives up to its name now more than ever, feeding not just bodies but souls, nourishing not just appetites but understanding, serving not just meals but moments of genuine connection.